The rope cut into her wrists. Amara Okafor could not feel her hands anymore. The warehouse was cold.
Dark.
Somewhere in Seoul, she did not recognize. A single bulb swung above her head, throwing shadows across the faces of 4 masked men standing in a semicircle around her chair. She could hear rain hammering against the metal roof. She could hear her own heartbeat louder than anything else. One of the men stepped forward. He crouched in front of her until his masked face was level with hers. "The Mafia boss will give us everything for you," he said slowly, his Korean accent thick and deliberate. "Every territory, every business, every account, or you die tonight." Amara stared back at him without blinking. "I am a nurse," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I save lives. I have nothing to do with any of this." The man smiled behind his mask.
"No."
"But he does. And apparently, you mean everything to him." He stood up and walked away. One of the other men raised his phone. A video call connected. On the screen appeared a face she recognized immediately. Seo Kang-jin. His jaw was set. His eyes were cold fury barely contained behind glass-smooth composure. Even through a tiny screen in a dark warehouse, he was the most dangerous-looking man she had ever seen. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he said one sentence. "Don't touch her. I'm coming." The call ended. Amara closed her eyes. 3 months earlier, she had never heard the name Seo Kang-jin. 3 months earlier, her biggest problem was a double shift and a leaking ceiling in her apartment. 3 months earlier, she was just a nurse from Lagos trying to survive Seoul. And now men with guns were waiting for the most feared criminal in Korea to come trade his empire for her life. May God bless every single one of you watching this right now. May everything you are waiting for come to you this season. Before you go any further, please subscribe to this channel if you have not done so already, and drop a comment below telling us where in the world you are watching from. We love seeing you out there. Now, let us go back to the beginning. Amara had arrived in Seoul 18 months ago on a work visa and a prayer. She was 28 years old, a trained nurse with 4 years of experience in Lagos, and a family back home that depended on every naira she converted from the Korean one she earned. Her mother had a bad knee that needed surgery. Her younger brother James was in his final year of university. Her sister Chisholm was 12 and needed school fees. Amara carried all of it. She shared a small apartment in Mapogu with 2 other Nigerian nurses, women she liked but rarely saw because their shifts almost never aligned. She ate mostly jollof rice she made herself on Sunday nights and reheated through the week. She attended a small African church near Itaewon on the days she was not working. She was lonely in the specific way that only immigrants understand, surrounded by people and completely invisible. But she loved her work. The hospital was a place she understood. Bodies that needed healing were the same in Lagos and in Seoul. Pain did not have a language barrier. She was good and she knew it, and her supervisor Dr. Yoon had told her twice that she was one of the most efficient nurses on her ward. She was 3 hours into a night shift on a wet Thursday when everything changed. The emergency room doors burst open at 11:47. She knew something was wrong before she even looked up because of the silence. The usual low hum of the ER went completely quiet. She turned and saw why. 6 men in black suits had entered in a tight formation around a 7th man on a gurney. The men were not crying or panicking the way families did. They were scanning, eyes moving across every face in the room, every exit, every corner. 2 of them had their hands inside their jackets. Security noticed. 2 guards moved toward them and immediately stopped when the lead-suited man said something very quietly. Just a few words. Whatever he said made the guards step back. The man on the gurney was bleeding from his side. His shirt was dark with it. His face was pale, but his eyes were open, and they were extraordinary, completely alert, completely calm, in a way that made no sense for someone losing that much blood. Dr. Park rushed forward. Amara followed. "Gunshot wound," one of the suited men said. He refused an ambulance. He insisted on this hospital. "We need to get him into a bay immediately," Dr. Park began. "No cameras," the suited man said.
It was not a request.
Dr. Park looked at him. Then at the bleeding man. Then he nodded. Amara did not nod. She was already focused on the patient. She checked his pulse, lifted his shirt to assess the wound, her hands moving with the automatic precision of someone who had done this hundreds of times. She did not care who he was. She cared that he was bleeding. "Sir, I need you to stay with me," she said in Korean. Her Korean was not perfect, but it was functional. "Can you tell me your pain level on a scale of 1 to 10? The man looked at her. He seemed slightly surprised that she was talking to him like a normal person. His lips moved. 6, he said. "You're lying. It's higher." "That's fine, you don't have to tell me." She pressed gauze firmly against the wound. "You're going to be okay. I need you to breathe slowly. Can you do that?" He held her gaze and breathed. Slowly, the way she told him to. She did not know his name yet. She did not know that half of the men in the room would die before they crossed him. She did not know that people in Seoul said his name the way people say the name of weather, not because they liked it, but because it came for you whether you were ready or not. She found out 2 days later. He survived surgery. The bullet had missed everything vital by a margin that the surgeon called extraordinary luck. Amara was not on his ward, but she heard the nurses talking, heard the name, heard what came after the name. Seo Kong-jin, head of the Seo syndicate, 34 years old. More arrests than convictions. More enemies than allies. More money than God, and less mercy than the devil, if you believed what people said. Amara found she did not particularly care. She had done her job. He was alive. That was the end of it. Except it was not. 3 weeks later, she was at the nurse's station doing paperwork at 2 in the afternoon when she heard the ward go quiet in that particular way again. She looked up. He was standing at the entrance to the ward. He was wearing a dark coat, no tie, no bodyguards visible, though she suspected they were somewhere close. He looked entirely recovered. He looked like he owned the building and was simply deciding whether to keep it or sell it. Their eyes met. He walked toward her. "I came to thank the staff," he said. "The staff appreciates that," she said, and went back to her paperwork. He stood there. She could feel him standing there. She kept writing. "You were the nurse who treated me," he said. "Yes." "What is your name?" She looked up. "Amara Okafor." "Okafor." He considered this. "Nigerian?" "Yes." "You spoke to me like I was an ordinary patient." "You were an ordinary patient," she said. "An ordinary patient with an extraordinary number of men in suits, but medically speaking, a gunshot wound is a gunshot wound." Something shifted in his face. It was barely anything. A fraction of something that might have been, on another man, the beginning of a smile. "I brought something for the ward," he said. 2 of his men appeared from nowhere carrying boxes. High-end Korean snacks, premium coffee, the kind of things that cost more than a nurse's daily salary per box. Amara looked at the boxes. Then she looked at him. "That's very generous," she said. "The staff will appreciate it." She picked up her clipboard. "I have rounds." She walked away. She did not see the look on his face as she left, but the man standing closest to him, his chief advisor, a slim man named Director Choi, saw it clearly. He had worked beside Seo Kong-jin for 11 years. He had watched him negotiate with rivals, dismantle enemies, build a criminal empire from nothing. He had never seen his boss watch anyone walk away from him like that, like he was watching something he did not know the name of yet but already could not afford to lose. Kong-jin came back the following week. And the week after that. He always had an excuse. A donation for new equipment. A visit to a staff member he claimed to know. Once he arrived claiming he had dizziness and needed to be checked. Amara checked his blood pressure, told him it was completely normal, and sent him home in 4 minutes flat. "You did not even offer me water," he said at the door. "We reserve water for people who are actually unwell," she said pleasantly. "I could have you transferred." "To where?" He paused. "To a better hospital," he said, though even he seemed to realize that was not the threat he meant to make. "This is a good hospital," Amara said. "Have a safe drive home, Mr. Seo." He came back 3 days later with what he described as a headache. This time she sat across from him in a consultation room and looked at him steadily. "Mr. Seo, why do you keep coming here?" He looked back at her just as steadily. "I told you. I have symptoms." You are one of the healthiest men I have examined in the last year. Your blood pressure is perfect. Your resting heart rate is 58. You either have access to a personal trainer who is very good at their job, or you have the constitution of a man 20 years younger. I could be concealing something. You could, but you're not. She folded her hands on the table. I'm going to ask you again. Why do you keep coming here? A very long silence. Then Kang Jin said, I don't know. It was the most honest thing he had said to her, and somehow they both knew it. She let out a slow breath. Okay, she said. Then maybe you should find out. She stood. He stood. They were closer than she intended in the small room. She was tall for a Nigerian woman, 5'8", but he was still taller, and standing this close he was a different kind of presence than across a ward or a desk. She could see the faint scar along his jaw that was older than the gunshot. She could see that whatever this man had seen in his life had left evidence on him in ways no medical examination would catch. She stepped back and opened the door. Same advice as always, she said. Hydrate, sleep, and perhaps find a hobby that doesn't involve getting shot. He almost smiled again. She was almost certain of it. He called the hospital the next morning and asked whether Nurse Okafor would be available for a private consultation at a time of her choosing, to be compensated at whatever rate she considered appropriate. The hospital administrator was so flustered by the call that she relayed the message to Amara verbatim. Amara's response was also verbatim. Tell Mr. Seo that nurses consult in hospitals, not on private call, and that if he has further health concerns he is welcome to book an appointment like everyone else. When Director Choi delivered this response to Kang Jin, the man was quiet for a full 20 seconds. No one has ever said no to me, Kang Jin said finally. He did not sound angry. He sounded like a man who had just found something he did not know was missing. I know, Choi said carefully. She's not afraid of me. Apparently not. Why? Choi considered this. Perhaps because she has not had any reason to be. Or perhaps, he paused. Perhaps she simply sees something different when she looks at you. Kang Jin said nothing. He looked out the window at Seoul below him, the city he had spent 15 years bending to his will, and he felt something he had not felt since he was a boy standing outside his father's restaurant watching families eat together through the glass. He felt small, and he did not entirely mind. He booked an appointment. A real one. He came alone, or as alone as Seo Kang Jin ever was, which meant 2 men in the waiting area and a driver outside. Amara met him in the standard consultation room, and they sat across from each other like 2 adults. You actually came, she said. You told me to book an appointment. I didn't think you would. I always do what I say I will do, he said. She believed him immediately. She did not know why. She just did. They talked for 40 minutes. Nominally about his health. Actually about everything else. He asked about Lagos, which surprised her. He had read about it. She could tell from his questions, which were specific in the way that only reading produces. She asked about Seoul, about the city he clearly owned large pieces of. He answered without the armor she expected. He told her that he had grown up poor in a neighborhood that no longer existed, demolished for a development he had partly financed in a particular irony he had never told anyone. Does it bother you? She asked. Where you grew up is gone. Everything I knew when I was young is gone, he said. I stopped expecting things to stay. She was quiet. She understood that more than she expected to. When the appointment ended, he stood at the door and said, without looking at her, Would you have dinner with me? It was not exactly a question. No, she said. Why? Because I don't know you well enough. And because your world and my world are very different. My world is just Seoul. So is yours. You know that's not what I mean. He turned and looked at her directly. If I were an ordinary man, would you say yes? She thought about it honestly. Maybe, she said. If you were an ordinary man. I'll come back, he said. I know, she said, and was surprised to find she didn't mind. He did come back. And he came back again. Not always to the hospital. Sometimes he sent a card to the staff entrance with a message asking if she would walk with him for 30 minutes in Uedo Park, which was across the river and public and entirely safe. She went twice. Then 3 times. Then she stopped counting. They walked. They talked. He told her things she suspected he had told no one. That his father had died in debt when Kong Jin was 17. That he had built his first network not from ambition but from desperation, running errands for men he would later outrank, learning everything they knew. That he had not slept easily in 11 years. That he had never had a person in his life who asked nothing from him. She told him things too. That her mother's knee surgery was coming up and she was terrified it would go wrong, and there was nothing she could do from Seoul except pray and wire money. That some nights she sat on her building roof and looked at the Han River and felt so far from home she almost could not breathe. That she had once considered going back, but then she thought of James and Chisholm and her mother's knee and she came back downstairs and made more jollof rice. He listened to all of it. He did not offer to fix anything. That was what surprised her most. A man with his resources could have thrown money at every problem she named. He never offered. He just listened, which was the thing nobody with money ever understood was sometimes worth more. She was falling for him. She knew it. She was furious with herself about it. She was watching a man who ran criminal operations, who had people hurt, who existed in a world that operated on violence and fear. She was a nurse. She spent her professional life repairing the damage that worlds like his created. She told herself this every time she thought about him, which was becoming too frequent to be comfortable. She prayed about it. She called her mother and did not tell her about him but told her she was confused about something, and her mother said, "Confusion is just the feeling of something changing." Which was not very helpful, but also was. Then one evening he told her the truth about his father. Not the version about debt and death he had offered before. The real version. They were sitting on a bench facing the river. It was October and cold, and he had given her his coat without asking, the way people do when they have stopped pretending the gesture is casual. "My father didn't die in debt," he said. He was looking at the water. He was killed by the men he worked for because he tried to report them. Amara went very still. He gathered evidence. Kong Jin continued. He had names. He was going to give them to investigators. He told one person he trusted, and that person told the wrong person, and 3 days later my father was gone. A pause. I was 17. I had nothing. So I went to the men who killed my father, and I offered to work for them. I spent 6 years learning everything. And then I dismantled them. Every single one. And then, Amara said quietly, and then I was at the top of something I had built without noticing I was building it. And there was no clear way out. He finally looked at her. "I'm not asking you to forgive any of it. I'm not sure I have." She held his gaze. "Thank you for telling me." "Why?" "Because it changes how I see you. Not everything, but enough." He nodded slowly. "Then, I think about leaving it. All of it. But I don't know what I would be without it." "A man starting over," she said. "That's not nothing." He looked at her in a way that made her chest hurt. "Amara." His phone rang. He looked at it. Something crossed his face, fast and sharp, the mask going back on so quickly she almost missed the transition. "I have to take this," he said. He stood and walked 20 meters away. She watched his posture change as he spoke. The softness went out of his shoulders. His voice dropped to something she could not hear. He came back 2 minutes later. He was Seo Kong Jin again. All of him. Every layer of armor in place. "I have to go," he said. "Is everything okay?" "Not yet," he said. He handed her his coat, and his hand held hers for just a moment longer than necessary. "It will be." He walked away. The 2 men who were never quite invisible fell into step behind him. 3 days later, Director Choi came to the hospital. Alone. He asked to speak with Amara privately, and the expression on his face was serious enough that she stepped into an empty consultation room without arguing. "I need you to understand something," Choi said. "There are people who have been watching Mr. Seo for some time. Rivals. They have noticed that he has changed his patterns. That there is a specific location he visits regularly. That there is a person his security has not been briefed to protect." Amara's stomach dropped. "You are telling me I am a target. I am telling you that you could become one." "And Mr. Seo," Choi paused. "He is not thinking clearly when it comes to you. which is remarkable because he always thinks clearly, which means you are more dangerous to him than any enemy he has ever faced. I haven't done anything, she said. You don't have to. You just have to matter. He held her gaze. Do you understand what I'm saying? You want me to stop seeing him? Choi said nothing, which was its own answer. Amara walked out of the consultation room and stood in the corridor and put her hands flat on the wall and breathed. She thought about Kong Jin telling her about his father's face when it was cold and dark and there was no one watching. She thought about the way he looked at the river. She thought about a man who had never had anyone ask nothing from him, who had found something in her and did not yet know what to do with it. She called him. He picked up on the first ring. Choi came to see me, she said. A silence. I know. Did you send him?
No.
Do you agree with what he said? A longer silence. I agree that you're in danger. I don't agree that walking away from you is the answer. Another pause, lower. I can't do it. She closed her eyes. Kong Jin. I know what you're going to say. Do you? You're going to tell me that this is not a smart situation. That I am a criminal and you are a nurse and nothing good comes from the two existing in the same space. You're going to tell me that you have a mother with a bad knee and a brother in university and a 12-year-old sister, and you cannot afford to have my world touch yours. Yes, she said. That is what I was going to say. Is that what you want to say? She pressed her forehead against the wall. No, she said very quietly. It's not. Then we figured out together, he said. Give me time. I am working on something. Just give me time. She did not answer immediately. The corridor was quiet around her. Somewhere down the hall, a machine beeped steadily. Someone's heart going on. Okay, she said finally. But Kong Jin, promise me you won't let your world become my world. I promise, he said. And she believed him, because he always did what he said he would do. She should have known that promises are not armor. 4 days later, she finished a 12-hour shift. She walked out of the hospital at 7 in the morning, tired in the particular way that only long nights produce, the kind of tired that lives in your bones. She was looking at her phone, reading a message from her mother about the surgery date, when the van pulled up. It happened very fast. 3 men. A cloth. She had time for one breath of something chemical, and then nothing. She woke in the warehouse. And now, in the present, she sat with her hands bound behind her, looking at a phone screen that showed a man's face she had fallen in love with without intending to, and watching him say 4 words with the certainty of a man who has never left anything he decided to keep. Don't touch her. I'm coming. The men in masks settled in to wait. She did not know what was coming. She knew who was coming. She started to pray. He came with 40 men and no announcement. The first Amara knew of it was a sound like the building itself breaking. The lights went out. There were shouts. The men who had been guarding her suddenly had problems of their own that were larger and more immediate than a tied-up nurse in a chair. She heard glass, impact, the specific sound of violence organized and purposeful. She heard her name once, in a voice she recognized, and she called back. Kong Jin found her in less than 2 minutes. He was in dark clothing, and there was something on his forearm she chose not to look at directly, and his face when he saw her was something she had no word for. Not exactly relief, not exactly fury, somewhere between the two where something raw and ungoverned lived. He cut the rope with a knife from his pocket. His hands when they found her wrists were careful in a way that contradicted everything else about the moment. Are you hurt? He said. No, she said. Her voice shook. I'm okay. You're shaking. Yes, I'm aware. He pulled her against him without asking and held her the way people hold things they are terrified of losing. She did not pull away. She put her face against his shoulder and let herself shake for exactly 30 seconds. Then she pulled back. Kong Jin, she said. I know, he said. He looked at her face, and something settled in his. Something that had been loose for a long time, finally in place. I know what I have to do. What does that mean? It means this ends tonight. Not just them. All of it. She searched his face. What are you saying? I'm saying that I have spent 15 years building something I don't want anymore. He held her gaze steadily. My father tried to report them and died for it. I've spent 15 years telling myself I was different because I took them down first. But I'm not different. I'm just the next one.
His jaw tightened.
I have documentation. Enough to dismantle the entire network. Mine, the rivals, the corrupt officials who have been protected for years. I have been holding it because I didn't know what would come after. But I know now. Kong Jin, if you do that, I go to prison. Yes. For how long? I don't know. Long enough. He reached up and touched her face once, gently. But there is no version of this where you are safe, while I am what I am. And there is no version of this where I can be what I want to be while you are at risk. He lowered his hand. I made a promise. She looked at him. The warehouse was chaos around them, and he was completely still at the center of it, watching her, waiting. You always do what you say you will do, she said. Yes. She breathed. Then do it. Do what your father couldn't. He looked at her for one more second. Then he nodded. 2 days later, Seo Kongjin walked into the National Investigation Office with a lawyer and 11 encrypted hard drives. What unfolded over the following weeks was the largest organized crime prosecution in Korean history. 47 arrests, 3 government officials, 2 rival syndicate heads. Corruption cases that had been buried for over a decade, suddenly unearthed. And Seo Kongjin himself, charged, convicted, sentenced. He did not fight it. He was in the courthouse when they put the cuffs on. Amara was not there. He had asked her not to come. She had respected that, sitting instead in a small church near Itaewon, her eyes closed, not quite praying but not quite not praying either. Her phone buzzed. A message from a number she did not recognize. It said, "It's done. Thank you for showing me it was possible. Don't stop being exactly who you are." She put her phone down. She sat in the quiet church. And she wept, not from sadness, but from the specific grief of watching someone you love choose the right thing when the right thing costs everything. Then she dried her eyes. She had a shift in 4 hours. 2 years passed. James graduated. He called her from Lagos, and she heard the smile in his voice from 6,000 miles away, and she cried again, the good kind. Her mother's knee surgery went well. Chisholm turned 14 and developed an obsession with Korean drama that Amara refused to comment on. Life was not easy, but it was hers, fully and specifically hers, in the way she had been building toward since she stepped off a plane in Incheon with 1 suitcase and a prayer. She was promoted to senior nurse. She led a team. She started a small support group for African healthcare workers in Seoul, which met on Tuesday evenings in a community center near Itaewon and drank too much tea and talked about everything and nothing. She learned to cook kimchi, badly at first, and then with acceptable competence. She ran a 10K in March and finished in a time she was quietly proud of.
She thought about him.
She would be lying if she said she did not. Sometimes it was just a thought that passed brief and clean. Sometimes it was heavier. She prayed for him on the days it was heavier. She did not know his release date. She had not asked. On an afternoon in November, 2 years to the month after the trial, she walked out of the hospital into rain. She had an umbrella, and she opened it and stood for a moment on the steps, watching the street. Rush hour. The city moving around itself in its particular Seoul way, organized and relentless. She started down the steps.
She stopped.
Across the street, under no umbrella, standing in the November rain with his hands in the pockets of an ordinary coat, no driver, no suited men, no armor of any kind, was Seo Kongjin. He looked thin. He looked quieter than she remembered. He looked, for the first time since she had known him, like a man who was not sure of his reception and had decided to show up anyway. They looked at each other across the street, and the rain, and 2 years. She did not move. He crossed toward her. He stopped at the bottom of the steps and looked up at her, and she looked down at him, and the rain came down on both of them, and Seoul moved on around them, indifferent and constant. "I've spent 2 years," he said, "learning how to live as an ordinary man." Her throat was tight. "And, did you learn?" He considered it honestly, the way he had always been honest with her when she made space for it. "One thing," he said. "Only one thing matters." He held out his hand. An ordinary hand. No ring. No watch. No evidence of power except the evidence that remained in the man himself. The steadiness, the eyes that had always seen her clearly even when she wished they wouldn't. "Will you walk with me?" he said. She looked at his hand for a long moment. She thought about a warehouse, a park bench, a church in Itaewon, a 12-year-old sister who watched Korean dramas, a mother with a healed knee, a father he had finally honored, an ordinary man standing in the rain in front of her, asking for something he could not take. She put her hand in his. They walked away together, into the city, into the ordinary, unguarded afternoon, into whatever came next. No empire, no mafia, no fear, no past large enough to stop what they were finally, freely moving toward. The rain kept falling. They kept walking. And that, as they say, was only the beginning. If this story moved you, if it made you feel something real today, do this one thing right now. Hit the subscribe button below. You are part of this family, and we are so glad you are here. Like this video so more people can find this story. And drop a comment. Tell us what your favorite moment was. Tell us what you felt when Kong Jin walked out of that courthouse. Tell us where, in the world you are watching from right now. We read every single comment. We see every single one of you. God bless you, and we will see you in the next story. The end.